It's another beautiful Sunday afternoon. This is Rubbin Minds. Welcome. My name is Ebuka Obiuchendo. Thanks a lot for joining us. It's been 8 years for me hosting Rubbin Minds, and I'm very grateful for all the support and constantly joining us every Sunday. Hopefully we are here for much longer. 2021 is here, but for a lot of people, it's just the calendar that's flipped. Most things, a lot of the madness that's went with 2020 still seems to be happening. But most importantly for us here in Nigeria, COVID is still very real and very around. There's talks about, the second wave all around the world. Numbers are going crazy. For the first time, we crossed 2 million infections in 1 week around the world. That's how much this virus is spreading, and the death rate is going crazy. Nigeria is experiencing numbers that we didn't even experience when we were on lockdown. So everybody just needs to be a little more responsible. Wear your masks where you should, and please socially distance and just follow the rules. I know there's talks about vaccines. Not a lot of clarity yet about what Nigeria's positioning is on that, but I do know that, that gives people some hope to know that, 2021 should hopefully be different from 2020. We're going to be talking about, factors that will change or shape Nigeria in 2021. And I'm joined here by God Bless Otubure, who's been away for a bit. Welcome back.
Thank you, absolutely.
How are you doing?
Great.
Let's start with COVID now, because that's a big one, and it's still a huge factor, probably even a bigger factor this year than it was last year. Last year it caught us unawares. This year we should have been able to plan probably better around it. Looking at Nigeria specifically, what are your thoughts, fears, concerns, hopes with regards to how the virus will probably affect the economy this year?
So funny when you look at what our analysis was at the end of last year, is that the economy performed somewhat better than expected, especially because we had to, open up, and even with the recession that happened. If the numbers keep rising, as we have now seen, and the fear of another lockdown, we might just see that it would affect any iota of growth that we have planned, or that if we look at what the economists have said. So if COVID continues to become a huge factor, then a lot of things will be affected. A lot of things will be affected. It's going to affect the economy.
We're in our second recession in 5 years, which is scary for a lot of people, and everybody who's in Nigeria is definitely feeling it in one way or the other, no matter how much your income or your status is. Specifically about the economy now, with COVID still around, are there any thoughts on how do I want to put this? Do you wonder how we're going to come out of this with COVID still around? China has been able to do it. They're one of the few economies that had experienced growth last year. Do you see Nigeria doing that?
Do I see Nigeria doing that? So the question will be, how do I think the current group of people managing this country can pull that off with the kind of population that we have? So if you look at the 13-point-something trillion budget, which it's a recovery and resilience budget, if we follow that budget and implement and try to achieve just, let's say, 70% of performance of that budget, I see us coming out better. But if we go on a lockdown again and it is global, because you look at it, what moves every economy is manufacturing, the service sector, and every other adjoining sector that play a role in how we produce, consume, and all of that. So if we don't produce and people don't consume and we don't have people coming in from other parts of the world, definitely it's going to be difficult coming out of this. It is absolutely going to be difficult, because right now we need to have more resources poured into certain sectors. We have to protect specific sectors that are responsible for the large chunk of what we do, especially when you look at oil. And then you look at the fact that they've been talking about, diversification to other parts of the economy. So if we're able to protect our manufacturing to a large extent, if we lose out on maybe foreign engagement and all of that, at least we must ensure that local consumption and manufacturing stays, so that there's a level of equilibrium even within, the local economy, even if we can't get anything coming in from other parts of the world.
How much of a role will the reopening of the borders play in this?
Oh, definitely. This is 2021, and the AFC, FTA, has kicked off, and I think it's actually one of those things that will shape Nigeria moving forward. So if we have everything is international, but if we have West African trade still going on, and we can work with our neighbors to put better protocols to manage COVID, but we can trade. What it means is that what we didn't have in 2020, we're going to have in 2021.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, you talk about manufacturing. There are certain sectors that are sort of we're managing to thrive even with COVID, but there are certain sectors that were completely decimated. Tourism, the entertainment industry, those sort of sectors. We're hearing about clampdowns on nightclubs and places like that, where there's revenue there for people, but I mean it can't be accessed. We don't know how long this is going to go on for.
Yeah.
How do we start to pivot? Manufacturing is a long-term goal. The open borders, yes, commodities will probably be a little more accessible and all of that. But are there any other sectors you see that will shine maybe this year?
So you look at technology. The tech space, literally, it was like the pandemic happened for technology to actually show the world that, look, it's possible for us to do something different. I think technology continuing the growth, because now you see a lot of out of non-physical engagements are now happening more virtually. And even on this show, you've seen people calling from, we've had guests coming in from other parts of the world, and you can see that. So tech would work. Medicine, so we'll look at health, right? More telemedicine would have attention this year. So we're going to see an explosion of the use of e-medicine in 2021. And when you look at other sectors that I think would also find expression that will shine, is entertainment somehow. Because what 2020 did for the entertainment industry was to look at and say, how do we redesign entertainment industry? People were releasing albums in 2020. Now you have, I think there's one of these comedians who now have a show on YouTube, right? And you can
That's Basket Mouth,
yeah, that's Basket Mouth, right? He has a show on YouTube, and you see a lot of these other comedians are now creating content that people can consume, right, within their homes. I didn't want to mention telecommunications. Clearly, that is going to keep shining. It's absolutely going to keep shining. So, yeah.
Well, we're joined now online by Andrew Boforibo and Isabella Adedeji. Thanks for joining us. Same question to you guys. I don't know what your thoughts are on 2021 and how we're going to come out of this recession, how we're going to handle COVID, when the vaccine is going to get here. Are you hopeful for 2021 with the economy? Andrew?
Let me say that I have managed expectations for 2021 as far as the economy is concerned. The truth of the matter is, until we can fully open up, the Nigerian economy at any rate is bound to keep taking hits. And we can't fully open up because, one, the vaccine isn't here yet, and the vaccine won't be here anytime soon, at least not for Nigeria. The most optimistic estimates we have from the government is 4 doses by the end of the year, but even that is based on a lot of hope. And remember, that's 20 million people, so that's the max. And that doesn't even come close to our needs. For us to be resilient, we're talking about 70% coverage, so we're not anywhere close to that. So then the question now becomes, how are we going to handle our economy, sans vaccine in 2021? And if what we're hearing about this new second wave of COVID is right, if the severity of it, the symptoms and the virulency of it, if that's really bears out to be true, then we may end up with a situation where we're locking down far more frequently than any of us would hope or would have liked. And simply because we can't handle, the health implications of that. I don't think anybody wishes for that, but we have to start looking at that and seeing that, well, that might be the underlying problem for 2021.
Isabella, that's been an ongoing debate around the world. The UK went back and forth about, certain tiers and levels of lockdowns before finally going into a full lockdown again. No country wants to go into that again. But there's also, of course, the health implications, and people are actually literally dying. What do you think about a second lockdown happening here, and can we handle it?
I don't think we can handle a second lockdown. I think the economy is not prepared for it. I mean, when I think about 2020, I remember all those videos on social media where you had human beings almost looking like ants invading warehouses with palliatives. And I mean, there you had palliatives. We knew about these palliatives, but the government hasn't come out to say anything about maybe a second set of palliatives. If you're asking people to stay at home, people who live on less than $1 a day, people who earn a daily wage, then you need to have palliatives, and not palliatives that are stored up in warehouses, but palliatives that are going out to the people. So I don't believe the government can handle a second lockdown. Also, I mean, you are going to fund the budget, and the budget comes. A lot of revenue also is generated internally. So I'm thinking of taxes. If businesses are not open, if businesses are not making money, then how do they pay taxes to the government, and how does the government execute the budget? So I think from an economic standpoint, we can't afford a second lockdown. If we do go on a lockdown, then what about security measures in place? Again, I think about the NSAS protest, and even in the aftermath of the lockdown imposed in Lagos, and just the sheer amount of vandalization. I mean, there was also the loss of lives. I think the government will be looking very strongly into the full implications beyond just the virus. Incidentally, if you go to, say, countries like the United Arab Emirates, you see everybody wearing their masks. So it's not impossible. I was just really surprised at the 100% compliance from what I saw over the holidays. And I just had to ask someone, like, why is everybody wearing their mask? I mean, is it a carrot or stick policy? And they said, well, there is a fine in place if you do not wear the mask. And everybody has more or less gotten back to some level, a semblance of reality. I mean, the UAE, despite having so much oil, they rely a lot on tourism, and we've seen the numbers starting to rise again. So when I look at the UAE, I do believe that there is hope in Nigeria. I want to remain hopeful because I think beyond even just the deaths that we're hearing about, and I mean, when you start hearing about people you know who are dying from this virus, or maybe known personalities, then that whole thing of it being a myth seems to start clearing away. But I really want to hold on to hope, because I believe that fear can also paralyze us. I mean, the fear of going out, the fear of going about our businesses, even the fear of just finding ways to be more innovative. So I do believe that 2021, just like God Bless said earlier on, it's a time for tech to respond to the challenge. It's a time for innovation. And I believe that the young people who make the majority of this population will rise up to the challenge and be innovative. We've seen that in media and entertainment, in the services business, and I think we'll continue to pivot as necessary.
Thank you very much, Isabella. Let me come back to you now, Andrea, and I want to switch to education, because that took a major hit in 2020 with the ASU strikes, which I don't even know what the situation is. Yes, it's been called off, but there's also talk about schools not being able to open. Even those not in higher institutions could not go to school because of COVID. There's still COVID. Are we going to be able to make up enough ground? We don't even know how many schools can open and how, that's going to work with the pandemic still in sight. What are your thoughts on education this year?
Simply put, education this year, we're probably going to be seeing more of the same, because unfortunately, we have not seen a systemic response to the challenges of education, of educating during a pandemic. And you could say that that's the same problem across the board, not just in education. The thing with COVID is COVID rewards prepared societies and punishes unprepared ones. And so there is no getting around that. There is no way to hope your way through that. You simply are reaping what you sow as a society. And Nigeria has sown, 5 decades of lack of planning, on seriousness, no infrastructure, and no discipline. So here we are. So with education, for instance, now the vast majority of primary and secondary schools in Nigeria do not have the infrastructure and cannot afford the infrastructure for, school from home, e-learning, online education. it's almost entirely out of the question for the students and pupils attending those schools. And the question now becomes, and for a lot of them, education, and that's not just the public schools. People always have the assumption that when we talk about underfunded schools, it's only the public schools. The vast majority of Nigerian pupils are in private schools, but those private schools just don't have the resources either. Not every private school is like, a highbrow one. Most of them don't have the resources. So the question now becomes, how will they get the resources to train those kids? Or are those kids going to have to, go into classes? And if that's the case, then it's going to be like Isabella talks about. We're going to have to use a lot of public discipline, wearing masks, distancing. And we saw in 2020 how most schools could not enforce, like when the students came back for WAEC, most schools could not enforce those, policies of distancing, and safety precaution. And so if we're now going to have to do that on a wider scale, a larger scale for all 12 basic classes, the question now becomes, how can we be optimistic that those precautions will still be taken? So are we basically saying, so again, we're left with a choice and there's no good answer. And I think that's one thing that Nigerians have to prepare themselves for in 2021, is that we are going to get the answers wrong because of our lack of resources, our lack of planning, and general indiscipline, we will not have any good answers. We're always going to have to choose between poverty and pandemic. And in education, we're going to have to choose between, shut down schools or, a rampant pandemic. And I'm not saying choose one or the other, but understand that those are your bad choices.
All right, I'll come back to you, Andrew and Isabella, but let me address something that in spite of all of these problems, there's still a huge factor that is unique to us in a certain way in Nigeria, and that's insecurity, which we're still battling. There's still, people who couldn't travel for Christmas because they were scared of certain factors. It's still, and a lot of people saw what happened with the lockdown in Lagos and got even more afraid. Are we seeing any concerted efforts? Are you hopeful that 2020 will throw up sort of a different dynamic for Nigerians with regards to their safety?
So I cannot, in all good conscience, say that yet, especially when you look at the way we discussed security in Nigeria in 2020. And the fact that looking at post-EndSARS reality, we discovered that you were actually on your own in this country, right? We were providing our own security. I mean, when you look at the jailbreaks, those were not just things that happened on its own. It's a huge reality call that we don't have the kind of security that we should have as a nation. Am I hopeful? So what I thought about in the analysis was, I do not see the service chiefs finishing 2021. I believe, and I'm saying it, and anyone can hold me to that. And if it doesn't happen, I'm going to apologize. I do not see the service chiefs remaining in office by the end of 2021.
Why?
Because clearly they have failed. The security apparatus, all of them have
And Mr. President
failed.
still seems to have faith in them.
He said their best is not enough. In a society where accountability is held top-notch, they have no business remaining there. So I believe that the force of nature, the evidence of failure, would so stare us in the face that the president himself would have to tell himself that it's time for these guys to go. If we have that change, it doesn't mean that the security challenges will stop immediately. Then we can begin to see that there is a concerted effort. When you look at when you look at the budget, defense has the highest. I was going to weigh in on the education bit, but I'm really distressed because this country doesn't seem like we are ready to make progress.
We're going to take a break now and come back and continue and conclude this conversation because, like we say in Nigeria, problem not the finish.
You need to finish.
Let's take a break and be right back. All right, welcome back. We're talking about factors that will shape Nigeria in 2021, and it's been pretty grim, to be honest, and I want to try and just lighten things up a little bit. Isabella, I'm sure you can hear me. 2021, yes, there's a lot of things that we are probably worried about. But are there things that give you hope, things that you're looking forward to, things that you might be looking at and saying, okay, this year could be at least better than last year?
Yes, definitely. I think 2020 has shown us what it is to be living with the pandemic. So, if anything, just like Godfrey said, we're not prepared, but this is a time for us to go back to the drawing board and say, okay, what worked during 2020? Why were we able to come out of a lockdown? Why were we able to keep the numbers low for so long? Apparently, something has been working. And I think kudos to the government. I mean, we might not always agree with them on every single thing, but they have had to take some tough decisions. And some of these decisions are beginning to pay off. I mean, the fact that even children were able to return back to schools, and we're not hearing of too many fatalities. I mean, that's something that we can take back. And I think even if, as the schools reopen again, we are more prepared. The teachers know that, okay, there's something called blended learning. For someone who works in the education sector, I think this has been a wake-up call for education practitioners, education providers to rethink how they're delivering service. And now we're seeing more people embrace technology. We're seeing teachers become very innovative, even in the rural areas where maybe you can't get the television lessons, or you can't get online learning. We're seeing people take megaphones and use maybe religious spaces, and still they're able to communicate. They're still able to reach their students. You're seeing people use WhatsApp to deliver lessons. So I think, if anything, that 2020 has shown us that we can be innovative as a people. Yes, the government needs to do more, but given the circumstances, I choose to see the glass as half full, because like I said earlier on, if we're all crippled with fear, then we will even start dying faster. The moment someone sneezes around you, you just believe, oh, they have COVID-19. And it reminds me of Ebola. And I think as a people, we were able to defeat Ebola, and we're just going to learn how to live with the virus.
But do you get this sense of optimism, though, from Nigerians when you speak with Nigerians?
Yes, I do get that sense of optimism. Life goes on, sadly. And I think we really embody that ego better. I don't know whether it has to do with maybe our religious convictions, whether it has to do with the fact that we've had to learn to live with so little and somehow make it work. Okay. But when I go to the markets, for example, I see optimism. When I go outside Lagos, because I believe the people who are in Lagos are very different. I was in the eastern part of Nigeria during the festivities, and there was a certain sense of hope and joy. And even a few months ago, I went to the southwestern part. So I do believe that beyond Lagos, where we're seeing huge numbers, there's that sense of hope that we've come out of it, we're doing better, and we're learning to live with it.
Thank you, Isabella. Andrew, do you share this optimism that Isabella has?
Well, let's put it this way. I'm glad it exists. But for myself personally, I guess I'll put it this way. Nigerians have been very happy and very hopeful people my whole life. While at the same time, Nigeria has gotten steadily, let's say, more challenged my whole life. So I think our optimism is not in itself pertinent if it does not lead to sound planning. Sun Tzu said, tactics without strategy is the longest path to victory, but tactics without strategy is a noise before defeat. And that's usually what happens with Nigeria. We're very hopeful, but we don't really have a plan to get there. And so in terms of one thing that I'm very optimistic about and hopeful of is the one sector that tried to keep Nigeria afloat. If you look at our GDP, we've been talking about the recessions. If you look at our GDP for the last year and a half, we've been seeing all the sectors are tanking, but one sector that's been going up, specifically in the service sector, is telecoms and ICT. So that's been one ray of hope in a in a very cloudy sky. But what's happening right now in IT and telecoms, you have this Damoclean sword hanging over their heads with this NIN SIM integration thing.
So we have to get that right for things to work properly.
That any phone line that isn't, Yes, it has to be done. Or if, as the government seems to be suggesting, we're about to see a mass disconnection in February, the question now becomes what happens to the only sector that has seen positive GDP growth in the last 2 years?
Well, thank you very much, Andrew. Let me just round up quickly with God bless, because I want to get your own thoughts as well on what's giving you hope for this year before we quickly go.
What's giving me hope is that post-EndSARS is reawakening the idea that this country belongs to young people. We will not be silenced. We will continue to speak up, and that we cannot continue with the way things are. And it has really revealed the fact that there is a relationship and there's a social contract. The contract is that we give you our power and our right to lead us, and we hold you accountable. And what 2021, the hope is that we were able to say we can get things done. We're not the generation that don't know their left from their right. That is what gives me hope. So we're going to meet the NIN registration challenge head on. We're going to get people registered. We're going to do it. And once, and then another thing again that I think before I just round this off that will shape 2021 is politics and democracy. And the fact that we're going to have more investment in the civic space. Because what we have now seen is we don't have a thriving democratic space, every other thing will become endangered to the whims and caprice of authoritarian rules and people who kill institutions. So for me, I just believe that I'm excited about it, and I believe that we can get some things right in 2021 moving forward.
Thank you very much. God bless. Thank you very much, Isabella. Thank you very much, Andrew, for this very insightful conversation. We'll keep talking, hopefully for the good in 2021. We're going to take a quick break, and we're going to come back talking about content creation in 2021.
Dear creators, dear everyone, really. If you're lazy but you want to be very consistent this year, here's what you need to do. 1, accept your fate. Be honest with yourself and say, I'm lazy, but I still want to change the world. Say, don't be ashamed. Lazy people matter. Number 2, set smaller goals. Don't do 90-day challenge. Who are you kidding? Start with 3 days, 7 days. All the people you are seeing doing big challenge, they are not your mates. They are also not lazy. In case you're forgetting who you are, remember number 1, you're lazy. But that doesn't mean they're better than you. They're just different. Don't be intimidated. Be inspired. 3, leverage your peak periods. This means if you know that you normally feel inspired only once a week, on that holy day of a creative high, create multiple posts, write 5 articles. As I'm making this video, I'm making 9 others for the rest of the month. It's not because I'm hardworking, it's because I'm lazy. Or as I prefer to put it, efficient. I do not condone laziness, so I think people should work hard. I'm just saying, there's work to be done, there's money to be made. And if we're being honest, there's a very high chance that your bad habits and your shaky work ethic won't change overnight. If we're being honest, you get. I don't want you to feel useless because you normally screw up all your resolutions. There's yet hope for you. Lucky for you, the important work of moving the world forward does not wait to be done by perfect people.
All right, welcome back. Yes, we're talking content creation in 2021. There was a general feeling of just, depression and just disappointment across the country last year, across the world even. But somehow people turned to the internet and the online space to just get some sort of relief. And, content creators kind of thrived a lot last year and gave us some, some things to cheer, at least take our minds off all of the doom that met us with the lockdowns and the pandemic and all of that. And hopefully that continues this year. I'm joined now by Salim King from Abuja. How are you doing, Salim?
Very well, Ebuka. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us. Great video there we just saw. This content creation seems to be one of the new career paths for a lot of people. A lot of our fathers and the older generation don't seem to get what it means and why it is a thing. How did you dabble into it?
I guess for the most part, boredom and an awareness of the fact that we're in this space where I could create the life I wanted, right? 10 years ago, 20 years ago, if you didn't want to go through the traditional path of finishing school and finding a job, you had to become an entrepreneur or an artist. And in this day and age, there seemed to be a space for something else, something different, where you could put your thoughts out there and have people who are thinking the same thoughts but need somebody to voice those thoughts for them, and then they relate with that, and you have access to their hearts and their minds, and you get to create a career out of it. So that's what it was for me. I always had a passion for sharing knowledge, transferring wisdom, and putting it out on the internet gave me an avenue to do it in a creative way, and I've made a career out of it over time.
Very interesting. I mean, 2020 saw a rush of new content creators online. Everybody wanted to, be an Instagram influencer, a content creator. And I've had a few of them on this show in the last couple of weeks and months. And I've had interesting reactions. There are people who said they could just not create anything because there was just too much just gloom around them that it was hard to create. There were others who were even inspired more, to do more during the lockdown and through the pandemic. What was your experience with things last year, and how different do you see it being this year?
Yeah, initially it was definitely difficult because no one saw 2020 going the way it went. It was surprising for literally everyone. All the predictions went south, and all. So, of course, it was difficult initially, but a change happened for me when I realized that I was struggling because I was trying to go back to a time in the past where I felt inspired. But I had to catch up with the new normal, which is something everyone needs to do in every sector, really, not just in content creation, to realize that the way it is gone and it's never coming back. And we just need to get with the program of what life is now and how to rebuild from scratch with the new normal. That means in a lot of ways, we might have to become beginners all over again, unlearn some things, relearn some things, throw away some, pick up some, not be ashamed to admit what we don't know and to learn from those who do know. Yeah.
All right. I'll come back to you, Salem, but I'm here in the studio with with Crackhead Extra. Can we talk about your name, first of all? Because that name is quite interesting. How did you come up with that name, first of all?
Okay, so I came up with content first, and I had to think of what could be catchy. What's catchy enough for this content? I mean, just going to the market, scream a song, with my ears blocked. What
would the reaction be?
What would the reaction be? So I had to find something that suits it, something that's crazy.
Yeah, but because crackhead can be derogatory. People see it as a name that's not necessarily a compliment. So why would you go with a name like that?
Because I'm weird. I like weird stuff.
When did you start this?
I started in August.
Okay.
Yes.
So during the lockdown,
yeah,
while the pandemic has lasted and all of that, you got inspired. What was the motivation for it?
Well, I've always liked content creating, and I have a team. We think of what's not already in play, what's different, what can I do that's different from others that will stand out, and we came up with the idea. And then since it was the pandemic and people were at home, most people were using their phones. So we have to look for something we can put out there to keep people entertained.
What was the very first one you did, and what was the reaction to it?
The very first one was a Malay song. Yeah. I posted it, and I didn't really expect it to blow up. No, I just expected it to be a gradual process, and all of a sudden, everything came fast, was blowing up, it was everywhere. Yeah, I did it and I posted it. I did two. I posted them simultaneously. I posted one first and then the other. And when I posted it, it was overwhelming.
The reaction shocked you?
Yes.
What were you doing before that?
Well, I was a TikToker.
Okay.
Yes, I like to use TikTok. I like to just create, up on a sound or music, dance to it.
Yeah. Kind of like I asked him, when you tell maybe your parents or uncles or whatever that this is what you do they get it? And how do you explain it to them, if you need to?
Well, I explained to my parents that I'm going to do content creating. I'm going to create things and put online. And with time, it will bring income, because brands want to advertise things and all that. Oh, they didn't really get it.
Yeah.
So I went ahead anyway.
Yeah, I ask that because there's a lot of belief that people should follow certain traditional paths, or even if you're not following a traditional path, at least it should be something that we can sort of figure out. Do you think content creation is here to stay as a proper career? Not the people who are doing it as a passing phase to move on to other things. Do you think it's possible to be a content creator for a long term?
Yes, I think it's here to stay.
Yeah,
I think it's here to stay. Because this is the digital generation.
Yeah.
It's not like those days that it was just maybe television and all that. Nowadays, people use their phones a lot, and it's what people use to sell their brand. The reach is far better than just physical.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can reach people in other states, other countries.
Yeah, I'll come back to you and talk about money because that's always a huge attraction for a lot of people. But Salem, let me come back to you now. And, same question I asked. Do you think content creation is a viable career path? Sustainable, I beg your pardon. Like, is it something you see yourself doing for a long time? Or can someone decide, okay, I want to be a content creator and choose this as a career?
Yeah, I definitely think content creation is here to stay, and our approach to it matters a lot, So if you think about it as a hobby, which is a passing phase, you treat it as such and your results will be that way. But if you see it as a job, it is a real job, especially in other parts of the world. There's social media management, new media, digital entrepreneurship. It is an actual career path. It's true that it's not as recognized in Nigeria, but it's definitely here to stay. One of the reasons why is before, if you wanted to create any kind of content, you needed to have like a full-on production thing going on. But now all you need is a smartphone or access to a smartphone that's not even yours and a creative brain, and you're good to go. So with such a low bar, with such a, there's no gatekeepers, it's so easy to start and get going and take seriously. I believe content creation is definitely here to stay as a long-term career path.
But don't you think what you just said there can be a problem, having no gatekeepers? Because literally anybody's just going to stroll in and want to do this. There's no form of training. There's no guide as to what content creation should be. Do you think that's a good or bad thing?
Well, it's a good thing on one hand. On one hand, it's a bad thing because literally anybody has access to it. But then that makes it easier to stand out because not everybody will put in the work that it takes to stand out, right? So whoever is doing the actual work of separating themselves or distinguishing themselves or taking extra effort to be eloquent or to put in the extra work, it shows because everybody is literally just having fun. But then this is not just some kids who we're not just frolicking, we don't just like pressing phone. This is actually important work to us. And all the happenings of 2020 has also shown us that we have a voice that is very loud and very strong. And we see the effects we have on the economy and on the country as a whole with just the access that we have to people's hearts, to people's minds, the influence, all of that. It goes a very, very long way. It has commercial value long term. Yeah.
Speaking of commercial value, because I said I was going to ask her, but let me start with you now. The money talk. There are people who are sort of accused of going into this just because they think you create content, brands come to you and pay you money, which of course we see happening. How viable is it, the money talk, and how much of a motivation was it for you to go into it?
That's an interesting question. Ibuka, there's money in everything, really. We hear it about almost every career. Oh, there's money in photography, jump into it. Oh, there's money in fish business. There's money in fish business. There's really money in everything. But the question is, will that money come to you? Are you going to command it? Do you have enough value to demand your worth, right? So it all comes down to investing in yourself. When I started, it wasn't just about the money, but when I started to make money from content, then I realized, okay, if I am putting this amount of effort and I'm making money, does that mean if I put 10 times the effort, I will make 10 times the money or 100 times the money? And I'm like, I should try and find out. And I did try and I did find out. And I am making a lot of money from content creation, but that's not the whole of it, right? There's money in everything, but there's a lot of work to be done. There are best practices, there are steps to be taken. You need to also pay your dues. You need to learn from those who have gone ahead of you. You need to treat it like a business, basically. There's content creation, which is a hobby, or, there's the creativity, but there's also the business of creativity, which everyone who wants to be a successful content creator needs to study.
Okay. Same to you now. I'll come back to you, Salem, but was money a huge motivation for you? I mean, everybody wants to make money in life. Most people go to school, they want to study a certain career or a certain course because they know that they are going to have a good life after that. Was that a motivation for you?
No, my first motivation was I wanted to do something I like. It's fun. Yes, for you to be able to do something well, your mind has to be in it.
Yeah.
You have to be having fun doing it.
Okay.
That way.
Sorry to cut you there. We have to take a very quick break. When we come back, we'll talk more about that and talk about your plans for 2021 and the Crackhead brand. Okay. Don't go, we'll be right back. We represent God, welcome back. If you're just joining us, we're talking content creation in 2021. And yes, that was a crackhead who's here with me in the studio. Have you ever had a situation where you were doing that and someone came to maybe thought you were not mentally stable?
Yes, but first off, they will be shocked. So before they discover what's happening, I'm already on my way out. Yeah, but several times people have come to me, are you okay? Are you okay? What's wrong?
That was very good, very well done. So before the break, you were talking about how passion was more important for you than money.
Yes.
Just finish that up.
Okay, so I personally believe that if you want to do a job, you have to love what you're doing.
Yeah.
I love what I'm doing. Of course, every job comes with its pay. But for you to be able to do it for a long time, you have to love what you're doing.
Yeah.
So passion comes first before you think of how this will bring you money.
Yeah. Are there plans to branch out into maybe comedy, mainstream, acting, or is this what your path is going to be?
Yes, I'm already working on it.
Okay.
This year. Yes, I'm
On
working
acting?
on YouTube
Okay, doing stuff on YouTube.
recently.
Okay.
Yes, YouTube and Facebook. I'll be alternating. I plan to branch out into comedy and then with time into acting. Yes.
Awesome. We'll be looking out for that. Sonny, let me quickly come to you now before we wrap up the show. Are there no-go areas for you when you're doing comedy? Because, we see all this shows, let's talk about, Saturday Night Live, for example, in America, where, it's a sketch show and they have, this satire around politics and stuff like that. Are there topics you would not tackle and why?
Yes, definitely. So first of all, I do not talk about topics that I do not understand very well because my following is set up in a way that is transparent and I welcome questions. So if I know that when people ask me questions about this subject, I'm not able to treat it intelligently and very clearly, I just don't touch it with a 10-foot pole, even when I know that I could talk about it.
Yeah.
So my page isn't just about sharing my opinions, but sharing the things that I learned from. Even though the content makes people laugh on some level, I also want them to leave with something that empowers them to go, face their own challenges, that shows them who they are and reinforces the idea of their identity and all. So whatever disrespects people, whatever is against equality, I don't make jokes about it. My stance is very clear. Whatever affects injustices in any way, I stay off those topics. And there are also other topics that are not necessarily wrong, but I just don't talk about them because I feel like there's enough people talking about them. I don't need to, I could just stick to my path.
Yeah. I mean, you are more about sort of inspiring, much more than even comedy or anything of that sort. And there's nothing we need more right now than being inspired because 2020 was hard enough. 2021 has started off pretty rough. What are your plans for this year? What should we be looking out for with you?
So I recently started a school, the Booster Academy, which is for creators. I realized a lot of people, with the lockdown and coronavirus and everything, a lot of people are starting to get into the space of content creation and they need somebody to show them the way and say, okay, this is where you can start from. If you don't know what niche to join, if you don't know anything about content creation, this is where you can start. And that's one thing that I am throwing myself into this year. I think I mentioned earlier that I have a passion for transferring knowledge. So I'm passionate about helping creators find clarity and community. I feel like there are so many people who could be in content creation who are stuck in jobs they don't like or stuck in lifestyles that they don't like. And they could be making money just sharing stories about the things they already do, the things they already spend their money on, right? And position themselves in a way that they can create the life they want. So that's something I'm definitely throwing myself into for the rest of this year. I did in most of 2020 or doing more in 2021. So yeah.
So where can we find you on social media?
Salem Kinging, anywhere, SalemKinging. Instagram, Twitter, everywhere, Salem Kinging.
Awesome stuff. Crackhead, 2021, what's the plan? I know you mentioned there's some YouTube in your future. What are the other plans that you're looking forward to this year?
Okay, I'm strictly focusing on YouTube and Facebook. I'm expanding. I'll keep on the market scenes, but then I have to branch out. I can't just keep giving people exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
So I'm branching out into different series. different crackhead adventures, crackhead in this, crackhead in that. Just watch out.
Where can we find you on social media?
You can find me on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter.
What's the handle?
Crackhead Extra.
At Crackhead Extra.
At Crackhead.
Very interesting name. You will definitely remember that one for a while. Before we go now, very quickly, for someone who wants to go into content creation today, what's the one thing you would tell them?
I would tell them to be unique, because anybody can go to the market and shout, but I'm not sure anybody can do it the way I do it.
So find your own.
So you find what you can do, and you do it in your own style, and you have to put your heart to it.
For it to work. Salem, quickly, before we go, same question to you. Someone comes to you and says they want to be a content creator in whatever genre. What's the one thing you will tell them?
Yeah, I agree with what Crackhead said. So adding to that, I would say start now while the stakes are low. Start now while you don't have a lot of followers. You can make all your mistakes while there's only few people watching. Don't worry and say, oh my gosh, there's not so many people watching. I want to have more people. No. Make all your mistakes while you don't have thousands of people watching watching you fall and all of that. So start now while the stakes are low. You don't have time. You need to start already as soon as possible. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Salem King. Thank you very much, Crackhead Extra. Awesome conversation.
Thank you for having me.
Have a great 2021. Keep inspiring us. Keep making us laugh. And we hope that the year is better than last year was.
Yes. Thank you.
All right, like I always say, you can follow the conversation on Twitter. Rubbin Minds now is the handle. Please use the hashtag Rubbin Minds when you tweet at us. Once again, please stay safe out there. COVID-19 is still very real. The pandemic is still raging. Be safe, wear a mask, and socially distance. I'll see you next Sunday.